Mr. Matt is asking, excluding download time, are there any IPU differences in speed between a ConfigMgr sequence driving the upgrade and driving the upgrade through a feature policy in Intune? Typically, Intune in-place upgrades are much slower because the content is still coming down with, well, it said excluding download time, in fact. So shouldn't matter too much, but usually if you have a sequence, you do a little bit more. You inject drivers and whatnot into the process. But if you do the same thing from Intune, I expect it to take about the same time. Because once the content is there, it's still setup running. It's just the difference is sequence starting setup with switches or Intune starting setup with switches. From that point, the sequence really doesn't do much. It's Windows setup all along for like half an hour at best, up to an hour and a half. If you're interested in learning what's going on behind the scenes, because I think stuff like that is interesting. If I go to a machine here, all the different phases are logged in the log file. So this is a tiny little log file, about 500,000 lines of logs. But you can see in great detail exactly what's going on in each of the 13 phases that setup is, exactly what it's doing, how long time it took to do that part, how much disk space that was used for that part. So if you're interested to seeing what's going on behind the scenes, and also start to comparing a slow upgrade with a quick upgrade, you can very quickly see, okay, which step is it that takes much longer time. I mean, we do have a lot of, there's a lot of things that you guys can do as an enterprise to make things just a little bit better. We covered some of that in sessions this week, but let's see. I go to the right machine.
What, do you have more than one?
I have more than one. Class notes, I will do. These are things you can do to reduce the number of failures that you have. And there are things you can do to speed up the process. So the most interesting ones is making sure you have an updated media always. Make sure to put large apps or drivers in Vim files because they download more quickly as a single file compared to 1,000 small files. Get rid of junk on the disk. Clean out temp folders, clean out ConfigMgr caches, especially for software updates. They don't need to be there. The likelihood that you're going to need a software patch from the old version of Windows you're going from with the new version is slim. So you can get rid of that. And we do recommend to basically split up download and pre-cache or validation and caching in a separate process compared to the upgrade. And of course, make sure to test everything that you have. Put that time in, and life will be better. So those are just relatively easy to implement tips. This one in particular, you need a friend for. That friend is named Gary. He's in the room. He has been for a good while up on garytown.com, keeping a pretty decent sequence collection available for download. Latest updated for 11.23H2, still works beautifully on later versions of Windows, but as you can see, it's been downloaded a couple of times. But if you take that collection and you import that into ConfigMgr, I do not need to go to you, but I want to go to this one. If I go to my sequences here, I have a Garytown collection. This is what you get. Even if you don't use ConfigMgr, you can still borrow inspiration from these things. For example, if you want to have inspiration on how to do cleanup, well, here is a sequence that does cleanup. And you can take these actions and run in whatever solution you like. It doesn't have to be ConfigMgr. Most of these are just PowerShell scripts. Sometimes they're just command liners, one-liners, like the one that deletes the older files in the temp folder. Super simple. Or you can put that in a bigger script and add some logging and stuff to it. There was a time where the ConfigMgr client would not install, would not upgrade if there were more than 75,000 files in the temp folder. It could not compile the MOF files. That was the case. Stumbled across one file of one machine that had 1.3 million files in its temp folder. It was in the APAC region. I didn't dare to log into that machine even. We removed it remotely. So a lot of inspiration to be found. Thank you so much, Gary. Appreciate that. We also have up on our little GitHub repository, we have a cleanup script we've been quite happy with. It's in the ConfigMgr folder. I will zoom in just a second. It's cleverly named, cleanup before upgrade. But it basically has a couple of sections that you can just flip on or off where you want them to run or not. And this will get rid of junk before you do an upgrade. Mostly we did this from 10 to 11, but it's equally valid from 11 to 11. Every time you need to do a full in-place upgrade. So, for example, the disk cleanup one, that was actually the one that took us the longest, because that one is using the built-in utility in Windows that you can automate. Problem with that one is it was not never fully intended to be run unattended, even though you can. So in some scenarios, you actually have to kill the process after a while. Just make it stop. But we put logic for that into the script. But yeah, fun stuff. Just a moment, sir.
I was saying that just because the native disk cleanup needs to have stuff put into the registry in order to run it silent or unattended doesn't mean it wasn't made for that, right? It doesn't feel hacky at all.
Well, that's how they implemented the change. And I think it's interesting when we start to look into what we wanted to delete from the beginning and what we stopped deleting. So this line here, we no longer delete. This line here, we no longer delete, or these components. Why? Because folks are using that as their documents folder. They have stuff in their downloads folder they work with. They have stuff in their recycle bin as an archive. So if you nuke their recycle bin, they get mad. Now, the upgrade may do changes to this as well, but at least we were not responsible for deleting their report or whatever it was. But fun stuff always. All right. Follow-up question from Matt there. What is an expected time frame? It's still, from what I've seen, within the half an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how much junk you have on the device. The biggest factor is the number of profiles, because the upgrade engine has to basically evaluate and enumerate all the profiles. And if you have shared devices, like healthcare, you have nurses sharing, like 40 of them sharing the same computers. You have 45 profiles on the box, of which 13 are obsolete, 2 are broken. The upgrade is going to take a while. The weirdest upgrade time I've ever seen was early in the Windows 10 era. It took more than 5 hours to upgrade the box. because I had an SD card in it. And at some point, I apparently have not done a safe eject, or whatever the command is in the control panel, in the taskbar. So it has flagged it as dirty. It didn't understand the file system. So it was trying to figure out what that SD card was. And the log file just grow and grow and grow and grow. So sidebar, but fun.